Okay, the recording started, and welcome to topic 6. And this is a very important topic. And I go back to when I was doing my master's in business, that was the last day of school, and the associate dean was teaching a policy course, and we asked him, what's the one thing that we should really be aware of, and what's important in order to be successful. And he came back with a very easy answer. He said, know the business, and you know the business through the numbers. So if you don't understand the finances of the business, you really won't understand the business itself. And that's why we covered a business model in this course as well. And the thing is that I have a friend who's a CEO of a local gas distribution company in Alberta. It's the fourth largest uh, um, co-op, and it has the third lowest operating costs. And my friend basically has grade 12, but essentially really knows the numbers, knows the finances. Come budget time, come audit, come performance reviews. He's just so keen on knowing those numbers, and he knows them intuitively almost, and that's why he's so successful. So that's why this particular topic, we're going to talk about financial ratios, and that we don't expect you to be, chartered accountants. But you need to understand that if you're going to be in management, you better be aware of the financial measures, and how the finances are managed in the business, because it's a big part of being successful. What gets measured gets done. In all essence. So we're going to talk about financial ratios. We're going to talk about the balanced scorecard, and those are the key measures of a business, along with the financials. And that, I think, is a lesson in itself. And I hope that, that I give you a good sense of what the balanced scorecard is all about. And not only that, it's where board of directors really focus on. And that's why you have a balanced scorecard strategy matrix. And it shows how all the key goals, some people call them objectives, tie into each other. And I'm gonna cover that as well as we go in. So if there aren't any questions, we'll get started. So anybody want to unmute and ask a question, we could do that right now. Okay, so you want to get started? Show me some thumbs up, and we'll get on our way. Okay, let's do that. All right. Okay, so let's get into the deliverables already, on what needs to be done for topic 6. And again, this chapter is really important. And again, it's uh, the foundations of control. And these are the key objectives. And this is, you can access this again, the files on Blackboard, under the folder for, topic 6. But it talks about the nature and importance of control. It talks about the control process itself, and discusses types of controls that organizations and managers use, and some of the issues in control. And again, it comes back to, what gets measured gets done. And if the targets are out there, and employees understand that managers are really on top of being updated on what's going on, they will respond. There's no doubt about that. And I've got some few stories about measurement, because I used to run a measurement group when I was in total quality management at TELUS, but I'll save that for later. Okay, so again, assignment number 2 is due tomorrow. And if anyone doesn't know, you upload that file at topic 6. But please, for any of you who have not uploaded already, read the instructions to make sure that you followed all the instructions for that assignment. And basically what you're doing is you're helping me help you. the more organized you are along the lines that I've asked you to be, and the more that you've subscribed to the readings that you were that were identified, the more successful you're going to be in this assignment. Okay. All right. No Pearson Rebel surveys in this topic. All right. So you got a little bit of a break here, and again, before reading week or study week. But let's just get into the two group exercises and participation topics. And then, that again is due, next Monday, February the 24th. And what we're going to use is a gingerbread example in that participation activity. And here's all the information about that gingerbread house that you have to, take into consideration to answer these questions. So we're going to get into some numbers, and we're going to get into cost of goods sold. And that's a key performance indicator that manufacturers and most businesses will really focus on, because that's really giving them a sense of where they can calculate their gross margin, or their sort of first take on their profitability measurement, and that's why it's so important. All right, so what it is that these are the things that you have to take into consideration. The gingerbread sale price is $3. You're only going to look at 3-gram wafer crackers at 10 cents each, and 1 candy jujube at 1 cent each. And it takes 2 minutes of one person to create a gingerbread house, and you have a labor rate of 33 cents a minute, for that one person, working for 2 minutes producing that gingerbread house, right? So it's very simple, but it'll bring you into making a calculation where you calculate that cost of goods sold, and then based on that calculated cost of goods sold, that's when you start looking at gross profit. And businesses are always looking, at their gross profit continuously to make sure that they're profitable as they go along, because if something happens and they're not aware that they're losing money, well, then there's big surprises at the end, and that's where a lending institution can pull their loans on you, or the shareholders will they'll just outright get not too happy with you. And then also what I'm asking you to do is to comment on how you can actually increase the productivity of these gingerbread houses, when you're producing them, and provide at least 3 recommendations. So that could be about, getting volume pricing on your raw materials. It could be on improving your production process, those kind of things. And here to help you, this is a link to, ways to improve productivity in the food manufacturing business. So that may give you some ideas on how you can handle this participation topic. And again, it's a group exercise. Okay, the next one, now 6B, is here's where we're going to start talking about, results of controlling the organization's financials, and we're going to talk about creating a balanced scorecard. And you've got many slides in this presentation that I'm giving you to really kind of get you there in terms of creating this balanced scorecard. Okay, and then there's questions that you answer. What should be the key performance indicator for the organization? So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about key performance indicators. And I've given you a reference as well with probably one of the best internet sources that you can have, that came out on picking or choosing the right KPI, and where, how useful it could be. And then ask what is a reasonable production goal? In terms of, well, do I want to increase my production, by 10% a day or a year, or increase my production by, 30 more gingerbread houses, per time period? And then how can you improve profitability? And that's where, the cost of goods sold comes in, and that's where gross profitability comes in. So that I want some commentary there. All right. So, and on the balanced scorecard, I want at least, 2 goals for each category, and I'm going to show you those categories as we go along. So we start asking, what is control and why is control important? So basically, it's not about, the typical control where, you're going to punish somebody for not performing. It's basically that you manage the entire behaviors around performance to achieve, the organization's goal outcomes. That's what it's all about. And managers actually they compare actual performance with a desired standard. And we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about benchmarking. So that's where we go out and we find out, who's like the best in class in terms of performance in baking, say. It doesn't have to be right in our business. Who's the best in class in servicing customers, and you might run like a beauty shop, but you would look at something comparable that you could emulate, and use in your own organization. So that's where that starts, is that you benchmark and you find out what the industry standard is and what the best are doing, the best of the best, so best in class are doing, and then what you do, you establish, based on that, you establish a target for your KPI and various KPIs, and that's what you manage to, right? So control is that final link in the 4 management functions. Remember we talked about, the 4 functions of management. They keep coming back, right? It's the only way managers know whether the organization goals are being met or not. And so what's control all about? It helps leaders plan. It helps empower employees, and it protects the organization and the physical workplace. So there's a lot of benefits. So, here's the 4 functions of management. And what we're doing here is that we're establishing standards, we're measuring, we're comparing our measurements with the standard. And also, it started with comparing to who's best in class so that we could set that target. And then there's some actions that are put into place to make sure that we're on track, right? And it starts with the planning, and then we organize, we structure, and remember we said, form, organizing, follows function. So the function is all about goal strategies and plans, and then the leading, is how we manage behavior, with the workers, and how we motivate them, how do we communicate with them, all those things. All right. So again, this is an old saying by one of the the pioneers in business, and he came up with what gets measured gets done, and it means regular measurement and reporting keeps you focused. That's what it's all about. And what's it for? It's to make decisions to improve your results. And the most critical measurements are key performance indicators. And so what you're doing is you set some goals, and then you establish targets for those goals, and then you establish, the measurement parameter that you're going to do. You're going to measure to make sure that you're meeting those targets, and then there's different types of key performance indicators from the customer end, from the financial end, and from the employee end. And you can see how this all comes together. Okay, so what are they? They're a small number, agreed. If you have too many, then you're all over the place, and you can't focus, and you only have a scarce amount of resources. So you make those KPIs count for you, and it's an agreed upon measurements that reflect your organization's critical goals for success. And it's a numerical snapshot. All you can do on that piece is you can trend on there, and we're going to get into different kinds of measures in terms of leading and lagging measurement at some point in time. But right now, you're looking at this snapshot, and then you're going to trend that to see if you're doing okay. So what are they? Those KPIs. Well, they're measurable, they're actionable, and sometimes we call these metrics. All right. So what metrics do you have in place? In terms of what measures your performance. And again, KPIs help you elevate, the most important metrics to become really the strategic drivers or touchstones, in your operation. And so some examples, so cost of service, percentage of technical support tickets closed in a specific time measures timeliness. So, in terms of a service organization, or percentage of satisfied users, measures user satisfaction. So these are kind of examples of what can be measured. And then why do you do it? Well, what you want to do is you want to align, all the organization's efforts. And when you do that, then that's where the power and the capability comes in. So you get strategic alignment, you get informed decisions, and you get performance improvement. So there's a lot to be taken from that. And so why do managers need to know those numbers? Well, you have to understand the operational decisions that you make, and know whether you've made a decision that works or not, and to know whether maybe you should change your approach or change your strategy, to identify problems early, to put actions in place to rectify, to increase the chance of meeting your budget, improve your own future, right? So if you're really good at managing KPIs, right from the get-go, in terms of doing the benchmarking to find out what's best in class, setting up the targets, finding the proper measures that can be measured properly. Like some measurements are hard to measure, and others are, a better review of what's going on, and that's where your management skills come in to be able to do that. Okay, so again, here's what to pay attention to in topic 6. So this is how it's going to, take a look at. So, cost of goods sold, know what gross profit is, understand what debt to equity means, in terms of how much debt you're carrying, in terms of, the equity you have in your assets, the receivables to working capital, net sales to inventory, economic value, and working capital. So this is key. You can see that this is highlighted. So these are the key things that you need to focus on in this topic to understand what they are, to be able to answer questions on test number 2. So working capital, the company is operating and how financially stable it is. And, I talked about inventory can be a big part of your working capital, and in some cases makes up 35 to 65% of the overall costs. So if you could manage that, that means then that money is not in your inventory, and it can go to reinvestment, or it can go into more profit for your shareholders, or those kind of things. And then economic value, well, a measure of the benefit provided by a good or service. So you could measure that. So again, now we're into the scientific era of management principles. So we're moving along this line, in our course. And you can see that, there's nothing more scientific about actually, taking measurement and comparing against, a target in the control process. Okay, so, we're not accountants, we're not all accountants. Some are, and some are in better places. What I found, I have to admit though, in the most successful people I've seen, or some of the most successful people I've seen in the organizations I've worked for, were finance people. Why? They could really understand the business in a very sort of solid way of knowing, what needs to be done in the organization. So BDC, I talked about that earlier. They're a business development corporation. They help small owners and entrepreneurs. If you go to this link, you can get this guide for financial management, a guide for entrepreneurs, so that could help you, understand what you need to do if you're starting up a business, say, as you leave this program. All right, so now we're going to start talking about the balanced scorecard, and I'm not going to play this entire video, but what I want to do is that I did a little bit of homework, and you should get sound on this video. So I'm going to play this video for starters, and then you'll get an introduction, to what. But this is probably one of the better videos that I found, and why is because it not only covers the balanced scorecard, it covers the balanced scorecard strategy matrix in this video as well. And those are things that you're going to have to understand to do the participation activity 6B, and also question 2 and question 22, if you choose to answer those questions in assignment number 4 on Amazon, right? So this is a crucial part of this topic that you should understand. So let me try to get into this, and I have to do it this way, I guess. Okay.
Hello and welcome to today's lesson.
Okay, so and just if you could just maybe give me a thumbs up if you can actually, hear this presentation.
Where we're looking at the balanced scorecard, which is a strategic performance management tool used by management teams to set and measure performance in a way that is aligned with the strategy of an organization. So why would you even want to use a balanced scorecard in the first place? Well, there are several reasons, including that they allow you to monitor and communicate progress towards your strategic targets. They allow you to link everyone's day-to-day work to the strategy and vision. They help you prioritize your projects, products, and services, and they increase financial health, increase customer satisfaction, improve efficiency, and increase knowledge and innovation within your organization.
Okay, just because I'm not going to show you this entire video, it's 10 minutes long, but I'd recommend that you follow this video, have a really good look at it. It'll really give you a good foundational view of what this is all about. But just the second point here, link everyone's day-to-day work to the strategy. I probably mentioned this before, and just let me know, can you hear me okay? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, great. All right, so the research says is that only 9% of North American workers can connect what they're doing in their job to the overall strategy. And that's why, as a manager, you really need this tool to be able to educate your workforce and to engage them in understanding the performance of the organization. And that's what management is all about, is really, and inspiring and engaging the right kind of behaviors to get to the right outcomes, right? Okay, so I'll just kind of swing along here and then just give you a little sense about where they're going to start talking about.
And we're back.
They're going to start talking about the strategy map, all right? The strategy matrix, the BSC strategy matrix. And I think I'm going to probably have to get rid of this ad as it comes in
third quarter planning. Adams is quarterbacking this project.
Plan and Norton in 1992. This isn't the most popular version of the scorecard in use today. We'll look at that shortly. So really all I want to point out here is that the key thing to take away from this example is that not only have KPIs been defined for each perspective, but targets have been set and current performance is being tracked against those targets. So here's the more modern way of creating a balanced scorecard, which goes by the name of a strategy map. Now, even though this introduces a few new concepts we haven't covered yet, it should actually be easier to use than the example we've just looked at. Why? Well, because instead of plucking your KPIs from thin air, you're linking them directly to your strategy. So for this example, I want you...
Okay, so you can see these connecting lines are very, very important, because now you see, where you start in terms of learning and growth, and really that's called organization capacity, how foundational it is to set up, the other part of the matrix. And again, I'm going to cover this in some of those slides. But when you do yours, I want to insist that you show the connections to these when you do the strategy matrix. Okay, so that's all I'm going to cover on this, because I'm going to get right back to the slides. Okay. I think this is probably one of the better um, management tools there is, and it started only for profit organizations, and now it's used throughout the world in all kinds of, like in hospitals, in in nonprofits even, because they found a good way to connect, and the term balanced is really important. Back in the 70s, the biggest measure was sales, and no matter if the salespeople would go out of their way because that's what they made commission on. And even though the customer wasn't happy, the salespeople were selling, selling, sort of things that weren't, that didn't bring customer satisfaction or were less quality because they were driven by profit. And Kaplan and Norton said, "Hey, we gotta find a balanced approach," and that's how they came up, with these four quadrants of that. So that's where that's all about. So you're on 6B. Your group exercise is to create a balanced scorecard, uh, um, and then answer these questions. What should the KPIs for the organization be? What's a reasonable production goal, and how can you improve profitability? And here's the template that I want you to use. And you don't have to fill this all up at this time around. You will for Amazon, and you will for in 9B, I believe it is. For Tim Hortons. So in this one, just take a look at the finances and the customer and the processes, in terms of what you could put together for this balanced scorecard. But here's where you start. You start with your vision statement. So again, it's back in this piece where I keep on talking about form follows function. Well, first of all, you decide, what is it that you want to do in your business? And then you develop a strategy to get there. And then, you establish this mission in terms of, what you're going to do. And then you organize, in the control process. So, you're ready to go. So what you're going to do then is create this balanced scorecard. Then you're going to create a balanced scorecard strategy map. And this little key right here tells you that you start at this layer and you move up, and you'll see the next slides that I'm going to go through to establish that. But again, just a reminder that assignment number 4 has 2 questions that you could answer. And here, what I strongly recommend, especially if you're going into, reading week, have a look at this document as your team and decide which questions that you want to answer so that you could pay better attention, in the participation activities, and really set yourself up, success-wise, to be able to do your best on this group assignment. Okay, so here's where we start. We start with learning and growth, and that's, that was the original terms that Kaplan and Norton started with. But really, this is what we're talking about, is organizational capacity. So really what you're saying is, what the vision is, you know what the form is in terms of your strategy, and your strategy will intonate your business mission. So now you know how to organize your structure to be able to, create the capability in your organization, in terms of having the right training, motivating the people. And then once you do that, then you're off to the races. So we call them strategic objectives. Some people call them goals, but in this particular illustration, you can see where you'd set up an objective, which I call a goal in this instant. Your KPI, your measures, and your targets, and then what initiatives are you going to do to be able to achieve those targets? That's what that's all about. So here's some examples, of the types of goals. So when you're doing this, here's some where you could go to and find out, what you can use. And then here's some examples of internal business processes, because, that's the next step. You start looking at, how can you improve things? And those questions in the participation activities, cover that as well. And then, then what do you do for the customer? How, your goals could be increase customer satisfaction, enhance your brand reputation and awareness. So you can pick out, what's pertinent and key, for the, and it depends on, the sort of the history of or the cycle of where your business is. If you're just starting up, some things in terms of KPI are more important to achieve, before you could do other things. And so that's critical as well. And then the financial, in terms of, well, how do we increase revenue, or how can we improve profitability? So this all will help you in terms of picking out what you think is important that you could use on your participation activity, and then come back to this, when you see this again in topic 9, because this information will be available to you. And then here's where you can click on this link and pull up this particular template. And just a note is that you can see that you're looking at, say, the finance piece, and you're looking at the mean performance. So in this case, one is productivity and one is growth, and you would have a goal for that. You'd have a key performance indicator on how you're going to measure that, and you would have a score, and you would average these two scores to give you a mean performance. And your score is basically, what percentage, of your target, did you achieve, right? And you can go to that. So again, here's some steps for getting you there. In terms of step 1, understand your vision and strategy. That's where you start, and then you develop the 4 perspectives, and you put them in, in that order: learning and growth. Then you go to internal business processes. That's your operations and stuff. And then you look at the customer perspective, and then you take a look at the financial perspective, because this will all kind of put itself in place to set that up. So again, then you select the appropriate key performance indicators. And again, they should be SMART. I'm sure you heard about, SMART objectives or whatever, where, that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And you set those targets, and then you assign responsibilities. All right. So again, step 4, again, develop initiatives and action plans. But here's a video link. It's only 2 minutes, and it'll give you a little more information of what KPIs are all about. All right. And that's a little bit of an introduction. Some of you may not have to do this, but when you get into implementing that balanced scorecard, I just want to show you, here's more about key performance indicators. And this is the source that I think is one of the best or better references on KPIs on the internet today. And there's a link to it. So if you click on this link, it'll take you right to the ebook and how to set that up, for your business that you're using. Okay, that's a lot of information. So let's just ask everybody, how are we doing? Any questions at all? No questions? You can unmute. Okay, so this balanced scorecard is going to come back several times. In topic 9, it's here to be done in 6B, participation activity. It's going to be touched on in assignment number 4, your group assignment. So that's a really key piece that you should really understand well. Okay. So let's start talking about cost of goods sold, because you're going to have to do a calculation, and I'm going to show you how to do that calculation, with a different example, and then expect you to put this together, right? Because again, you have to have an appreciation, for the finances in business, no matter where you are. If you're upwardly mobile and you want to get to a higher level of management, it's a must. All right. So there's no escaping it. So let me talk about cost of goods sold, and let me get your attention to this note down here. Now, the distinction of using the right formula, because I'm going to talk about cost of goods sold for manufactured goods versus cost of goods sold for straight sales. And the distinction of using the right formula shown above is one of the most frequent errors students make in this topic, right? So when we were, I have to bring it up, but I want to show you the difference. And so when we're making gingerbread houses, or when we're brewing coffee at Tim Hortons, we're really talking about cost of goods sold manufactured. And why? Because we include direct labor in this cost of goods sold. Where if you're just a retailer, if you're just selling clothes, well, there's no labor in making that clothes. You're just buying it from somewhere else and you're reselling it. You don't have direct labor in this particular one in straight sales. Okay, and let me just emphasize what direct labor is. Okay, so the Tim Hortons manager that manages the store itself, that is not direct labor. That's management, and that's that's operating. That's in the operating costs. But the people who actually cook the donuts, pour the coffee, take the sales, that is direct labor. So you need to understand that piece. So you'll see in this example, the worker that spent the 2 minutes to make each gingerbread house at 33 cents a minute, that is direct labor that becomes a part of cost of goods sold, right? Where again, on the retail side, you're really looking at, you bought clothes from a wholesaler. So there was, you didn't have any kind of direct labor cost into that. And then you sell that. And that's why this straight sales, it's beginning finished goods inventory plus purchases. That's where you bought the clothes in the retail, and then ending finished. So from how much got sold, and that's how much you bought to sell that amount is the cost of goods sold. All right. So I hope that makes a lot of sense. But again, there's a lot of information in this topic. You can go back to the recordings to learn more. But this is the key, and be mindful of this particular notice, is because it's this one that we're using to be able to calculate cost of goods sold for our gingerbread houses. Okay, so again, just a little more information. Okay, so when I talk about cost of goods sold, it's all about direct costs. So it doesn't include indirect overhead costs. So again, in cost of goods sold for Tim Hortons, they're not covering the insurance that was paid for the building. They're not covering the heating. They're not covering, the cleaning that went on in the building. Those are indirect overhead costs. All right, and so with manufacturing, you're gonna take a look at how much direct labor that you're using. Okay, so again, some more information to really come back to what is direct costs. It's a cost of producing the goods sold by a company, and again, it excludes indirect costs. So that's what you need to know. All right, so why does this matter? Well, because it gets us down to profit margin, or rough profit calculation, that we can measure on an ongoing basis to make sure that we're still making money, in this operation. And it's key to the pricing strategy. Yeah, because you might see that, maybe your cost of raw materials is starting to go up, which means that you'll have, a lot less profitability. So you're mindful of your cost of goods sold increasing. So you either need to sell more and with a lesser profit, or actually increase your prices to be able to make a good enough profits to stay in business. And from a financial analysis point of view, it's a key metric in financial statements. And then there's certain ratio analyses, that we're going to talk about. You're not going to have to know too much about ratio analysis, for the test, but that one slide that I showed you, that that listed, what was important, earlier in the webinar. Go back to that and find out where you really need to focus your study. Okay. All right. So it's an understanding of financial health. That's what you're doing. So what you do then, you're using this cost of goods sold to calculate your gross profit, right? And what that is how much money are you taking in minus, the cost of goods sold to produce the goods that you're selling gives you your gross profit. And it really gives you an idea of how to do expense management so that you could budget. And if you're not a good forecaster, then you can be sure that it's going to bite you in the end, because you don't want to get stuck with inventory, or you don't want to have not enough inventory to satisfy what's going on to be able to manage the best gross profit you can for the business. Okay, so if you ignore it, you'll have misleading profits. You won't really understand how well the business is doing. It'll be poor decision making. You'll get into financial trouble. I mean, it's key. So understanding cost of goods sold is vital for effective financial management. It allows you to do better pricing, better budgeting, better strategic planning, and it's really crucial for long-term business sustainability and profitability. So that's why we're covering this particular, metric, if you want to call it, which would be a KPI, to be able to really have a good handle on the business. Okay, so let me get back to benchmarking. So if you're in the restaurant business, okay, you'd want to know what your ratio of food cost to food sales is, and that's basically a ratio of your gross profit. And so what you do is, you do some benchmarking. So let's say you're in the restaurant business in Red Deer. Well, then you want to take a look at finding out, who's the most viable restaurant, or who has the most viable restaurant in Red Deer and that is successful. And you say, hey, we want to come and talk to you and see why you're doing so well. And you say, well, hang on, why would they want to do that? They're your competitor. There's ways around that, because maybe there's a particular, maybe food preparation piece that they're really good at, and you might go to someone else that's unrelated, that's not competing with you, to really get a sense of, what's their gross profit. And then that would be a thing that you would look at to try to meet when you create your standard, for your cost of goods sold. And that's what benchmarking is all about. It's really finding out who's best in class, and then comparing your operation to that operation and see how you can improve to get closer to that. So just one more explanation. So let's say that that you're in the Home Depot business, right? Home Depot, and they want to improve their supply chain of inventory to be able to lower the amount of inventory. Well, there's no reason why they can't go to Walmart. And Walmart is probably one of the best in the world in terms of their benchmark, in terms of supply management and inventory control. And they would probably allow you to come in and learn what they do. In some cases, some of the technology that they have is military grade or better in terms of inventory control and supply management. So Home Depot would get permission to go in and find out what's going on, and then they come back and see if they can apply those best practices, to improve their standard on inventory control and supply management. So that's what benchmarking is all about, right? So what you're looking at is that the cost of goods sold and plus the labor cost should be somewhere below 65% of all the gross revenue that you're taking in the restaurant business to be able to be viable. That's really what it's telling you. And you go through this piece to find out, where you should be improving your operations and how you should be pricing your output. Okay, and then there's another ratio that they use, and they use percentage cost of goods. And so that you would take your cost of goods sold and you'd divide it by your overall sales, over a particular period. So that's another formula. So gross profit is sales minus cost of goods sold, and then gross margin is sales minus cost of goods sold over sales. So I want you to go through these pieces to do that. And again, so what is financial management? Well, it's all about the planning, organizing, directing, controlling the business functions, with profitability and expenses and cash and credit, as the key, the key performance indicators to be able to do a good job in financial management. And again, you need to understand that, there's different areas of financial management, and you can see that this is highlighted. So this is something that, you'd really have to know for the test, is that some of the areas are treasury management, capital structure management, working capital management, risk management, right? So these are key areas. And so you can see in treasury, they're looking at cash flow, and we're going to talk about cash flow a little bit tonight. Capital structure management, the combination of debt and equity. So it's what they call managing good debt. If you don't have enough good debt, then you won't grow as much as you could. But if you have too much debt, well, then it's a liability, and you could get stuck where you don't have enough cash coming in to be able to manage your debt or service your debt. So capital structure management is really key. And then working capital management, I talked about that. It's that you want to try to optimize the amount of capital you have in your operations, like inventory or work in process inventory or machinery, to be able to get the best gross profit. And then risk management, making sure that you're minimizing the impact of loss. So this is key. All right. So again, how do you do that? Well, you benchmark, you find out, best in class, you establish then a profit goal, you determine the volume of sales and revenue needed to make that profit, you estimate your expenses, and you estimate the profit. So that's the planning process. Okay. And there's various ways of calculating profit. Okay, various ways. So that's where that goes. Break-even analysis, essentially what it is that you can, if you can accelerate your sales revenue, if you can increase your sales revenue over time much better, well, then what will happen is that you will need less volume of sales to break even, right? So if you can't do that, well, then you're going to have to sell a lot more to be able to at a point match your profit with or your sales revenue with your cost, and beyond this point is when you start making profit. Right? This is where you start making profit. Okay. Here's another ratio. So if you want to look at sales growth, well, you start with how did you do last year, and then how are you doing this year? You subtract that and then divide that by how you did last year, and that will give you, the fraction of sales growth, and times 100 will give you the percentage of sales growth on that piece. So here's the key. If you're not growing your business, it's declining. Why? Because costs keep going up, right? Inflation, wage hikes. So you got to be growing that business to make sure that you make enough profit. And so you can either increase your prices and sell more, and which means increase the revenues, or you can decrease the costs, or you can improve the existing offerings where you can offer more value to the customer and enjoy better sales, or you can actually create new products and services or new offerings to be able to increase your revenues. So the thing is that There's no standing still in business, right? And the whole idea, the challenge for a small business, cash flow. You got to manage that cash flow to make sure that you could, at the end of each month, that you have enough cash to cover your expenses and pay your employees and make some profit. And that's the key. So cash is king. All right. So understanding your cash flow, it gives you really good insight on where the money's going. You'll be able to identify the peaks and valleys of your spending, because a lot of your revenues and costs kind of go like this as you go through the year. During the holiday time, you're going to sell a lot more. During maybe if you're a winter production type company, during the summer you're not going to sell very much. So you need to be aware about that. Okay, so you need to know something about that control cycle is what I'm talking about. And what do you do then is you do some planning and budgeting, and then you allocate those resources, and then you do some operating, and then you measure how you're doing, and then you start all over again. How did I do? Well, then I got to do better planning and keep on going. And what you're doing is you're measuring your actual performance, what's being measured, and you're comparing that to a standard, and that's what this control process is all about. And I'm going to talk about that. And then, so sometimes it's just basic corrective action, looks at how and why performance is deviated so that you can correct. Sometimes you get right in there and correct on the fly, and to get back on track. And here's a managerial decision control process. And let's start again, so that you do some benchmarking, find out what the industry standard is, and then you develop your standard, and that standard is based on some key goals that you set up, and then you actually measure your actual performance of what you're doing, and then you compare that against the standard. And then you take a look at these questions. Is the standard being attained? Yes, don't need to do anything. But no, well, is the variance acceptable? Sometimes, you can have a certain deficiency from the standard that's tolerable. All right, you can manage that and still make profitability. And if it gets too out of whack, well, then you got to say, okay, I either have to change my standard or improve something. All right. So if the variance is acceptable, well, then you don't need to do anything. But if it's not acceptable, you find out, well, do I need to change that standard? Do I need to improve it, or do I need to maybe lower it? All right. And then if that's not acceptable, then you revise that standard. But if it is, you identify the cause of variation. And this is, where you get into another area. I'll just tell you about it. It's called statistical process control. And that's where you can, you have lower limits and upper limits of variability. And when you get outside those limits, that's when you know that from a statistical point of view, you've got problems that you have to fix. Don't have to know that, but I just wanted to kind of, put that into perspective. The next thing is there's different types of control. All right. So there's feed forward control, and then there's concurrent control, and there's feedback control. So let me just start with this one. Feedback control is basically, you're managing in the rear view mirror. So what you're looking at, let's say, monthly sales. Well, you don't know what the monthly sales is until the end of the month. So it's not telling you what you can be doing right away. And what you look at is you look at your monthly sales of February versus how you did in January, and then, or even back to December. And that's looking in the rearview mirror. So you're just assuming that the trend is going to be there, and you make, an assumption that, hey, okay, well, based on the trend, this is what we have to do. And that's not always desirable, because sometimes occurrences happen, and then it's out of whack, and then you can be, you can really be vulnerable in terms of the success of the business. Where you have concurrent control is that, and you can see there's a key here. So what's concurrent control? You correct problems as they happen. So you may see a machine on an assembly line that's that is running into a problem, and it can't produce the same level of output that it normally should. Well, then, you might bring in a machine to replace that. Like right now, like sometimes a lot of assembly lines have a redundant unit that they could take on so they could do maintenance on the other machine. And that's concurrent. Concurrent means at the same time. So you correct those problems as they happen. And if you correct those problems as they can happen, it's a lot less risk and a lot less expense than if you're finding out too late in the game using feedback control, right? And then feed forward, and this is where artificial intelligence is going to come in. Feed forward control and gives you the measures that anticipate that something can happen. And that's getting better and better and better as artificial intelligence gets integrated into systems. And so this is the most less risk and the least costly to have, in terms of what could happen down the road if you have a problem. So you can see that with feed forward, a lot less money risk ahead, down to feedback control, where it could cost you a lot, because what's happened is that you may have 3 months of product that went out the door that's of less quality, and what do? It's maybe being shipped to customers already, and then you have all the problems of dealing with customers complaining about the quality of the thing that you sold them, right? So that's that piece, and now we get into some traditional financial controls, and ratio analysis is really important. So what it is that you look at different ratios based on the type of business that you're running, where you are in the cycle of that business. So what's more important to stay abreast, and then based on the industry that you're in, and then based on the trends that are happening. So ratio analysis is left to the finance area of the business to find out the best KPIs that are there. But a lot of them are the budget analysis, how much economic value add that you're putting in, and then there's market value add. So the stock analysts will determine the price of your stock based on how well you're doing. So that's where you start adding market value added to your cost of your share price, versus economic value added. That's just the sheer computation of how much dollar value you're creating for the dollar amount that you're spending in cost to produce that particular product or service. Okay, I'm not going to talk about this too much, but you can see in financial analysis, just so they look at performance ratios, and then they look on the financial end of financial leverage ratios, in terms of how much debt and equity that you have, and this is key to really understand the trending in terms of are you a viable business or not. All right, so you can just kind of learn about that, but understand what liquidity is, and that's that's the enterprise's ability to pay short-term bills and debts. I talked about cash flow. Cash flow is all about liquidity. And then solvency refers to, the ability of a company to meet long-term debts and continue operating in the future, right? Those are the pieces, in here that, you really get to understand about, hey, is this business going to be around? And this one is, how well are we doing right now in terms of our production or creation of our services. Just this is for your information. If you want to know more about this, you can find out a lot, and it's on my Google Drive, so you can pick up this document to find out, what are some of the areas that you could look at in terms of financial ratio calculations for your business. Not going to talk about this very much, but again, understand that there's benchmarks out there. The Canadian government goes out and actually shows what the industry is doing in the industry that you're operating in, for these particular financial ratios. So you can see how you're going to stack up, and you can see, if you're way behind, well, then chances are you're not going to succeed over the next 5 or 10 years. So that's what that's all about. Okay, I'm not going to talk about that, but I'm going to talk about, let me bring you back to, first of all, let me just catch up on here. How are people doing here? So are there any questions? Anybody want to unmute and ask me a question? Okay, we got about, a good, I think about 20 slides left to cover. So I'll cover some of these things, and you can see that, this is highlighted. So you got to know something about benchmarking and what it is, it's a search for the best practices among competitors or non-competitors, and that lead to superior performance. So, you connect the best practices to your strategies and goals. You identify those best practices throughout the organization, and then you develop best practices, reward and recognition, and then you communicate those best practices, and you create best practices knowledge and sharing systems, and then you nurture those practices. So let me tell you how, my experience with that. I was actually on a committee at TELUS where there was a certain area in our service delivery process that we wanted to see how we could improve it. And we actually hired a company to go out and map different service processes that were successful for some leading companies in areas that were similar to telecommunications. They weren't telecommunication companies, but they had the same type of service delivery process. And again, so what this company would do is they went out and they analyzed and they found some of these best practices and actually showed us, the performance, in terms of financial ratios on how well they were doing. And then what we did was we would take these best practices and then go inside our organization and say, can we adopt this particular practice? Can we adopt this particular, based on what we're doing and the philosophy of how we operate? Because sometimes it won't fit, right? And when you do that, then what you're doing is that you're introducing an improvement, a transformation. So what happens then is you have to, recalibrate on your strategy and communicate in the organization. This is how we need to do something different in terms of improving areas in our service delivery process that would put us, cut above, our competitors in the business, and then actually put reward and recognition around those processes to make sure that people pay attention to it and communicate that throughout the organization and have some knowledge sharing and do some measurement around on that performance and education and everything else. And that's how, something that we learned from outside gets incorporated into our own operations, and all of a sudden, is a success area, for improving our financials and the quality of our outputs. So that's what benchmarking is really about. And the thing is that you can benchmark some of your KPIs across a balanced scorecard. Right? So there's different areas where, you might want to take a look at in your business, how does a similar business like yours do really well in the finance area, and then see if you can incorporate a key performance indicator that they're using that would work for your company to help you better manage a particular financial process. So that's what that would work. So what you do then is that you'd establish, a business target based on, what you think you can achieve from benchmarking, and then put that into the balanced scorecard piece, and then adopt the KPI that gets you to that target. And before all this started, set a new objective on performance, for that piece. And that's how this comes about. Okay, so here's another piece. I'm going to talk a little bit about corporate risk management. It's key. Corporate risk management used to be, something that was buried in the audit area of finance. And when I first started working, and then what's gone on is that they started understanding that people that were closest to the customer and the operations probably knew more about risk than what the audit finance risk committee or capability on the finance side could come up with, and so that everybody is involved in corporate risk management in today's world is what I'm trying to say. And it's about protecting your assets. It's making sure that you're in compliance with regulations and with health regulations and monetary regulations. And then you know how to mitigate or soften the occurrence of a particular risk factor that could do bad to the company, and then you could make a lot better decision making. So that's what corporate risk is so important now. And if people like stakeholders or shareholders know that you're taking those kind of risk management precautions, well, then that boosts investor confidence, and for sure it'll maintain your business continuity. A lot of businesses that I've worked in, we've actually, created a business continuity plan and had, a separate control center on standby in case, we lost equipment here and there or whatever. And then, that you foster this risk-aware culture. So it's pretty key. So corporate risk management is about preparing for the unexpected and making sure that the company is resilient, it's flexible, it's adaptive, and it can thrive even when it faces, these key challenges. So if you take a look at, like down south, like, I just watched a documentary about Texas, when their power grid went down because of, some really cold conditions that happened. And it turns out that power grid in Texas is on its own. It's not connected to any other grid. So if it goes down, it's done, right? Whereas, in Alberta, we're connected to BC, we're connected to Manitoba and Ontario. So if we lost a lot of power, then we could import it in from various places, and that's all about managing corporate risk. Okay. But there's different types of risks, and you can see now that, again, this is highlighted. So there's speculative and market risk. So it's uncertainty that something can happen, and then there's just pure risk, uncertainty associated with a situation where only loss or no loss can occur. This could be like a property risk or some sort of liability risk or even personnel risk. And so how do you manage those risks? That's the key thing, right? And so what do you do then is you identify and you understand these risks. And I'll tell you about, what in my experience, we would create a risk heat map. And I think I have a slide on that to show that some risks were more important than others. And then people could understand where the priorities are. So that's how you'd identify and understand those risks. Then you'd evaluate the potential severity of that risk. And then you select methods to manage that risk and then you implement those decisions and keep on measuring on what's going on. So here's some of the risk strategies. One is avoidance. So let's say that some company, it's a warehouse company, and it's really risky to inventory fireworks. So they may choose that, okay, we're not going to store fireworks. We're just not going to get into that business. So that's avoidance. Mitigation is, well, okay, we will look at these fireworks, but we're going to build a special building outside of all our other storage that has special sprinkler systems and problem detection, and then what we could do then is reduce the possibility of severity of loss. And then another one is transfer, saying, oh no, okay, well, we'll take on that fireworks, but we'll get special insurance. So if we lose the whole warehouse, the insurance company is going to come good for it. That's transfer. And then assumption is that you self-insure. That's what assumption is. And so you say, okay, we're going to build a separate building for these for this fireworks, but we're not going to get that very expensive insurance to insure that fireworks in that special building. If it burns down, we'll absorb the loss, right? And that's assumption. So those are the various strategies that you can put together. But the whole idea is that you're going to continuously monitor external and internal environments and take a look at, what are the strategic risks, and then you gather input from stakeholders. So that's how you really identify those particular risks. Okay, and that's it for tonight. Okay, so any questions at all? You can unmute, ask a question. Okay, we're a pretty quiet group tonight, but again, what I recommend though is, there's two videos on this particular presentation. One is on the balanced scorecard and the balanced scorecard strategy matrix. So you'd get the full deal in 10 minutes about, what's really important and how to really build, build the what you need for the participation activity 6B, and then take a look at topic 9, where you'll have to do it for Tim Hortons, and then another video on what are KPIs, and that will really put you in good stead. And I want to thank some of the people for bringing questions to me about the participation activities. I totally invite that, because what I'll do is I will answer those questions and then put the answer on Blackboard as well. So if you have a question, please, send me an email. Let me know what the issue is, and then I will help you get through it. And then a lot of your colleagues can take advantage of what's going on there. And the whole idea again is that I want to remind you on if you haven't handed in your assignment number 2, please, make a good point to review all the instructions and follow, the numbering sequences that I've asked you to follow. It just makes it much more easy for me to help you, to give you good marks. All right. So, help me help you on that, and we'll go from there. And again, any other issues, please email me, and we'll call it an evening. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll go from there.